There is a contradiction between two fundamental beliefs that everyone actually holds. On the one hand, there is determinism, which is rooted in the natural sciences. Everything has a cause. Therefore, all actions are predetermined, because the causes of every actions are beyond our control.
I don't think anyone would question that.
At the same time, however, we are convinced that we can make free decisions. We can choose, and our choice determines the outcome.
I think you have to choose.
So, you believe that we can make free choices and that determinism is wrong?
I didn't say that. I also think determinism is right.
Of course, believing in both propositions is a paradox. This is because even in a deterministic world, you would be free and responsible for your actions. This attitude has a name: compatibilism.
Having a name does not eliminate the contradiction.
Interestingly, this position has existed since long before the advent of modern natural sciences. In fact, it's almost 2,500 years old as philosophy itself.
But how did they explain determinism in the past?
In ancient times, it was attributed to fate. The events of the world were predetermined by the gods.
Okay, fair enough.
Chrysippus was one of the earliest advocates of compatibilism.
Who is that?
He was a Stoic philosopher. He made a decisive contribution to its success. Unfortunately, none of his writings have survived, so we only know about him through quotations from other authors. To resolve the contradiction, he argues that different objects have different causalities. Someone's behavior depends on the circumstances. For example, a piece of wood can burn, but it won't burn if it's at the bottom of the sea, because the water prevents it.
But what about the consequences of our actions?
Just like objects, actions have a destiny. Let's say you have a coat. You will take care of it.
Of course.
The non-destruction of one's coat, Chrysippus says, is not fated simply, but co-fated, with its being taken care of, and someone's being saved from his enemies is co-fated with his fleeing those enemies.
Chrysippus is certainly not brave.
For many things cannot occur without our being willing, and indeed contributing a most strenuous eagerness and zeal for these things. Since, Chrysippus says, it was fated for these things to occur in conjunction with this personal effort. But it will be in our power, he says, with what is in our power being included in fate.
So, no matter what I do, am I fated to take care of my clothes? This is not freedom.
That's not what Chrysippus meant. Of course, you are not fated to take care of your clothes. Whatever you do, you can act differently. However, if the consequences are different, it is only because your fate is different. There's a well-known analogy that illustrates Chrysippus' belief. It is called the walking cylinder and cone analogy. Imagine a cylinder and a cone. If you bump them both, the cylinder rolls and the cone spins. What causes the cone to rotate?
It is pushed.
Perhaps most people would agree, but the Stoics disagree. The cause is the shape of the cone. If you change its shape, the same input will have a completely different output. As humans, we must realize that we can control our shape. We cannot blame the inputs for our actions. If we choose to be cones, instead we have to try to change ourselves.
Actually, I don't want to be a sphere or a cone. I just want to be myself.
But you have a form. If you accept that your form is responsible for the outcome, you will achieve Stoic wisdom. A wise person is the ideal figure who never makes mistake, no matter what happens. The wise person will always make the right decision. Since everything is destiny anyway, there are no alternatives.
But you can act differently.
You can act wrongly, but then you are not wise, and that's fate.
But then you don't need to do much to be wise. You just act as fate dictates.
Even in ancient times, Cicero criticized Chrysippus. He argued that people who act morally cannot seek fame or praise. But his criticism goes much further. Conversely, he argued that the immoral person must not be punished. They are then not responsible for their actions.
Indeed.
A compatibilist would argue that punishment is also fate and aligns with the rational divine order. However, Cicero was not the only one to criticize Chrysippus. His argument is called by the philosophers the lazy argument, because if we give in to Chrysippus' notion of freedom, then we will never do anything in life.
If it is fated that you will recover from this illness, then, regardless of whether you consult a doctor or you do not consult a doctor, you will recover. But also, if it is fated that you won't recover from this illness, then, regardless of whether you consult a doctor or you do not consult a doctor, you won't recover. But either it is fated that you will recover from this illness, or it is fated that you won't recover. Therefore, it is futile to consult a doctor.
Eusebius's reasoning is logical, but that doesn't make it reasonable.
The question is not so much what is reasonable, but whether one's actions influence what will happen. Eusebius argues that no matter how you act, the consequences are determined by fate. Therefore, your actions are irrelevant because you have no influence on your fate. But Chrysippus contradicts this.
I suppose that's just fate.
According to Chrysippus, if I am going to recover, I still need to call a doctor. If I'm fated to recover, then I'm also fated to call in a doctor. The important thing is that I very much hope I will recover. So I hope I'm fated to do so. I will see the doctor even if I'm not fated to recover.
In that case, I don't really have a choice.
For Chrysippus, you must act in accordance with your destiny. If you want good things to happen, you must do good things. Chrysippus differentiates between two kinds of events. On the one hand, events with only one cause are simple.
Can you give me an example of this?
Yes, for example, the statement that Socrates will die that day is simple. No matter what he does, he will die that day. But other events are interconnected. Chrysippus gives the example of the athlete Milo. The statement that Milo will compete in the Olympic Games is dependent on another condition, as he needs an opponent. You can't say that Milo will fight in Olympia regardless of whether he has an opponent. Without an opponent, there can be no fight.
That's obvious. But does Milo have to call a doctor when he falls ill?
Chrysippus uses these considerations to counter the lazy argument. He argues that getting well and calling a doctor are connected events.
So should I call Milo a doctor or not?
It depends on whether you want him to get better, but that's fate.
So I still don't understand.
Chrysippus distinguishes between two levels that coexist. We can intervene on one level, but not on the other.
What levels are we talking about?
One is theoretical. Fate theoretically decides on actions. However, if you look at the same situation from a practical point of view, individuals have control over their actions. These two levels exist because there are different types of causality. Theoretically, everything is determined by fate. In practice, however, we have the opportunity to shape our destiny.
But if everything is predetermined, then acting freely is an illusion, isn't it?
According to Chrysippus, this contradiction is resolved because everything is predetermined by fate anyway. We can only accept the world as it is. We can't influence fate, but we can act in accordance with it.
But how are we supposed to act?
If you have no real freedom and everything is predetermined, you can still decide that you want to do. You can then do what you think is right. Then you can feel good about it. You are relieved of all responsibility. If you do what's good, that's just proof that you are good.
Yes, I always feel like I'm doing the right thing.
Those who resign themselves to their fate have nothing left to lose. Free decisions no longer matter. It's only about how you feel in this world.
I feel much better already.
Stoicism is the key to happiness in an unpredictable world. You avoid frustration because you only choose from the options available to you. You just make do with them.
But I see a problem here. If someone has immoral beliefs, they can act on them and feel good about themselves. That's also your destiny, so you can act immorally and justify it.
However, it should be noted that the Stoics would not have considered all actions that make someone feel good to be moral. Above all, everyone should live according to their nature and live in harmony with nature. They use the Greek term katikonda for this.
And how should I put this into practice?
For example, you have to respect your parents. You also have to pay your debts. If you don't, you are acting against nature.
A unity of nature and man. How beautiful.
Stoics like to compare people to animals because they also act according to their nature. Chrysippus argues that you can act well when you act according to nature. Being a good person is fate. Determinism and freedom are compatible. You can have your cake and eat it.
Now I'm hungry. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free, you can leave a comment if it is your fate. Don't forget to subscribe and we'll see you next time.